Well, with Jeremiah chapter 32, we are almost to the main event of the destruction of Jerusalem that's coming. We're getting really close. In fact, this chapter is kind of an interesting one of the story of Jeremiah. Um, so let's just jump in and get started basically. Verse 1, the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord in the 10th year of Zedekiah king of Judah, which was in the 18th year of Nebuchadrezzar. So this puts a good marker on it for us of knowing Zedekiah has been around for 10 years. So this is 10 years since the first exile of the ruling class of Jerusalem, basically. Also, if you're for Latter-day Saints, if you remember, the beginning of the Book of Mormon is the first year of the reign of King Zedekiah, is where the Book of Mormon starts off. So this is 10 years later. So they have made, Lehi and his family have already made the journey to the American continent. They're in, they're settled, they're getting in and getting their new life started over there basically by this time. Verse 2, for then the king of Babylon's army besieged Jerusalem. So let me finish it. And Jeremiah the prophet was shut up in the court of the prison, which was in the king of Judah's house. So realize, okay, so this is the siege that's starting to happen. We haven't had the full destruction yet. There's a couple of things. They didn't just march in and wipe everything out. Basically, this was a conflict that lasted for a couple of years. Basically, with this, so Babylon has come down. They've probably discovered that Zedekiah had plans to partner with Egypt to go against Babylon. So now Nebuchadrezzar sent his armies down to do his best to basically just go, I'm sick of the Jews, sick of Judah. We're going to get rid of them, basically. So there's a siege happening. And that's what's happening here, as it says in verse 2. Now, just a little bit after Babylon sieged Jerusalem, they're going to back off a little bit. So this is what's going to happen. So they come down to siege. And siege means basically they're surrounding the city of Jerusalem. The army's going to surround them. They're basically, anybody that tries to leave gets executed. They just kind of hole them up. So anybody, if you don't want to leave Jerusalem, you just got to stay in the city. But the problem is you can't go out and get your field. So there's no harvesting. There's no gathering your food. If your animals are out there and you don't have access to them, you just lost all your animals. So the city is going to be depleted of resources. And then once they get to a really bad spot inside the city, that's when the army comes in when they're weak. Now, this idea of siege warfare isn't just an old idea. We think about this today in our day and age. When a battle is about to commence, one thing that the armies like to do is to gain an advantage. And so they try to do things like take out infrastructure for the other army. If you remember in President Bush's shock and awe campaign in Iraq, that was destroying electrical grids, destroying government buildings, taking out internet access so that they could cripple the infrastructure of Iraq so that as the troops came in, it was harder for their troops to stay organized, thus giving our troops an advantage. That's kind of the same idea, basically. So they send bombers in, they do things like that to take them out, take out the key targets first, then everybody else comes in later. So that's kind of what siege warfare in the old days is kind of an analogous with that, basically. You're trying to look for an advantage. You don't just walk up and take out an army unless you have full confidence you're going to win. So sieging them, and this was perfected by the Assyrian army, 100 years earlier. You surround them, you let them starve near to death, then you just come in and take them out because they're not going to fight back. You have a more guaranteed win. But it does take time. You've got to have your troops out there for a while, basically. So that's what's happening here. Babylon has sieged Jerusalem. And so they're going to back off of that for a little while because they have to go fight Egypt, but then they're going to come back and then they're going to finish the job. So we're seeing this first wave come in right now, basically. So Jerusalem is sieged. Okay, now Jeremiah has been put in jail, if you remember, because of his speech he gave at the temple when he kind of called everybody to repentance and told them, guys, we just need to surrender to Babylon. That's the best way to survive this. And they're like, no, you're a treason, you're committing treason, you're anti-nationalist, stop putting this stuff out there. And so they put him in jail. And so that's where Jeremiah's at, is in jail, basically, as this siege is happening. So let's go to verse 3. For Zedekiah, king of Judah, had shut him up, saying, Wherefore dost thou prophesy, and say, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will give this city into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall take it. So in a way, what Zedekiah could be saying here is, why aren't you more like Isaiah and prophesy that God will save us from our enemies? I think that's what he's really saying. There's just a short sentence we get of what Zedekiah said to Jeremiah. But he's probably, again, like, Isaiah told everybody, hey, God will save us. He's going to be here to protect us, because that's what happened. But Zedekiah is forgetting, of course, if you go back to Isaiah, the king Hezekiah, king of Judah at the time, and he repented. He caused fasts to happen. He did things to honor God. Zedekiah is not. The people are all doing idolatrous worship. They're not honoring God at all, basically. So, in a way, this would be interesting to see if this really did happen. But in a way, Zedekiah is going, why aren't you like Isaiah? And Jeremiah could turn right back at him and go, because you're not Hezekiah. You need to be a better ruler too. So it'd be interesting to see if that was any kind of discourse they actually did have. So let's jump on to verse 4. And Zedekiah, king of Judah, shall not escape out of the hand of the Chaldeans, but shall surely be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon, and shall speak with him mouth to mouth, and his eyes shall behold his eyes. Verse 4 is an interesting one. Okay, this is kind of the continuation of what Jeremiah's been prophesying. So he's saying, look, Zedekiah, you're going to be taken hostage, and you and your family are not going to survive this. It's interesting that in verse 4 at the end he says, and his eyes shall behold his eyes, meaning, I believe, that Zedekiah and Nebuchadnezzar will meet. Now they kind of have met once, basically, but they might meet again. And I'm trying to think. I think they did meet, actually. We'll go on. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself on the story, but anyways, it'll be great. Verse 5, and he shall lead Zedekiah to Babylon, meaning Nebuchadnezzar, and there shall he be until I visit him, saith the Lord. Though ye fight with the Chaldeans, ye shall not prosper. So Zedekiah is going to have an experience meeting God in a way. I don't think it's a literal, like God came to him and like, hey, I'm God, you should have listened to my prophet Jeremiah. I don't think it's anything like that. I think what it is he's going to have some kind of a spiritual experience. It could be Zedekiah's down in the dumps and he prays and God says, I'm here still to help you. But man, did you mess up? Maybe something like that happened, basically. Now, we don't have that detail, unfortunately. When Zedekiah gets taken to Babylon, we kind of don't know what happened to him. He does die in Babylon, we know that, but we don't know any other experiences that he had. Now, verse 6, and Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, so now that we have backstory, okay, this is of how we got into prison. This is kind of continuing the story forward. Because if you remember, the other priests were trying to get him into prison and get him out of the way as well. So verse 7, behold, Hanamel, the son of Shallum, thine uncle, shall come unto thee, saying, buy thee my field that is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption is thine to buy it. Now this sounds weird. You might be like, wait a minute here. I thought this was like a conversation between Jeremiah and Zedekiah. So understand, okay, the first 5 verses of this chapter was basically the scribe, whoever put the book of Jeremiah together, is describing, okay, Jeremiah's in jail, and he's in jail because he basically ticked off the king and prophesied a bunch of bad stuff against the king and won't take his word back, and so he got put in jail. So that was the backstory, like we talked about, okay, with verse 6 is now the beginning of a new story. So verse 7 is telling this story of a relative of Jeremiah. And remember, some of his relatives actually tried to get him killed earlier. We saw that in some of the earlier chapters. I think that it'll come up again here in some later chapters as well. We'll talk about it. But now he's got family that are, so here's a siege. There's a siege that's happening basically. And his family's like, hey, you want to buy the land? You want to buy our land? It's out there, the northern end of the territory. We can't get to it because the siege is happening. So it's just kind of interesting. It feels like it twists right here at 6 and 7, but it's the first 5 verses again are backstory for what's happening. So this is the real story of the chapter, is what we're getting into here. So he's got a relative who wants to sell him land. Okay, so we're thinking around 588 BC. Okay, so that's a good time frame. This happened probably around the summer of 588 BC. So what was happening at this point in the siege was Egypt had marched their troops up and were fighting Babylonian troops. So Babylon took the army that was around Jerusalem and moved away from Jerusalem. And so the siege kind of let up for Jerusalem so that people could get out and go around and do things. And some of them escaped and fled to Egypt and other places. But they kind of left Jerusalem alone for a period of time while Babylon was dealing with Egypt. And so Babylon will be back, but they're hoping Egypt wins because that was the original alliance with Zedekiah in Egypt, but it's not going to work out. So in this intermediate period, basically, Jeremiah is still in jail. There's a few Babylonians, a little bit of the army are around there to kind of deal with the siege, but not a lot. So they can't enforce a ton. So the Hanamel is basically, so Shallum is Jeremiah's uncle, so Hanamel is Shallum's son, so Hanamel is Jeremiah's cousin, basically. He comes, so God is now telling Jeremiah, hey, by the way, Jeremiah, your cousin's going to come and ask you to buy land. Now, that might sound strange. Okay, so let's talk about this for just a little bit. The law was, if you had to sell your land, so this is land of inheritance. This is the land that they were given, start going back to the days of like Joshua. So this is land that they were told, you're not allowed to get rid of this land at all. You can't sell it. But if you had to, there are rules of how you sell inheritance land, basically. That's what's going on here. So what happens is you could sell it to a relative so the land stays within the larger family, basically. Jeremiah is part of the family. Nobody else wants the land. So Jeremiah, by law, is kind of next in line to buy the land. He's got first right of refusal. They can't sell the land to anybody else until Jeremiah says, I'm not interested in the land, basically. So it is possible Hanamel went to several other family members and they refused, since Babylon was still dealing with the siege and the wars and stuff. I'm sure everybody's like, why am I buying land? I don't even know if I'm going to live to see the next year. And they're like, I don't know. I just want to get rid of the land because it's kind of worthless right now. We might die, but I'd rather have money so I can go buy food than have land that I can't use. So they come to Jeremiah. And they're going, hey, Jeremiah, legally you have a right to buy this land. So we want to ask you about it before we go to other people, outside of the family to do this. So that's what's happening here. So verse 8, so Hanamel, mine uncle's son, so Jeremiah's cousin, came to me in the court of the prison according to the word of the Lord and said unto me, buy my field, I pray thee, that is in Anathoth, which is in the country of Benjamin, that's north of the city of Jerusalem. For the right of inheritance is thine, and the redemption is thine. Buy it for thyself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. So God told Jeremiah, this is about to happen. You should buy the land. And so now all of a sudden his cousin shows up saying, hey, you have right of refusal, would like you to sell the land. Verse 9, and I bought the field of Hanamel, my uncle's son, that was in Anathoth, and weighed him the money, even 17 shekels of silver. So Jeremiah's in jail. Babylon is sieging and fighting Egypt, basically. And God tells him, go buy this land. He's going to bring you an offer. Take it. Buy the land. Now, put in the comments what you think about that. Would you, if you were in jail and another army was sieging your area, would you go, "Hey, cousin, sure, I'll buy your land from you"? Or would you be like, "Are you crazy? This is nuts. I don't even know if I'm going to live to see next year." But anyways, God told Jeremiah to do that, to buy it. So he's going to buy it. That's I'm sure Hannah Mill's like, "Oh, thank you so much. You're the first person who's willing to buy the land. That'll help us have money to buy food and do other things." I'm sure is what was going through there. Now, verse 9, let's talk about the price here. Okay, 17 shekels of silver. He weighed him the money. Now, you might be looking at that going, weighed him the money. So he took a bunch of money and they weighed it on a scale, and that's how he decided the value, was the weight of the money, not the printed value of the money. Okay, there's a difference in here. So we have to realize in today's modern world, the value of the money is the spending power of the face value. Now, we can get into a debate on inflation and how that devalues the spending power of the money. That's a whole nother subject for another time. So in our day and age, we think of the face value. We trade, we exchange. If you're going to buy land, you're going to exchange the face value of money for that land. Now, back then, the value of the money was actually in the coin. It was an actual silver coin. So the weight of the silver was what the value was. I can take this amount of silver and I can take it over here and trade it for this. So they didn't have paper currency like we have today. Today, our money does not have inherent value in it. It's just a piece of paper. It's just a coin with cheap metal inside that looks fancy. It's all fake, basically. US dollars are fake. It's fiat currency. It's fake. It's an IOU from the government. It's only backed up by the promise that the government is good for it. As long as the government stays running and they keep the economy running and keep us from being destroyed by other armies, it's good. If any of that happens, it's not good anymore. Go look at the Weimar Republic, in fact, for World War II, and that'll give you some ideas. So we don't do that. Back then, it was the weight of the money that actually made the difference. So it wasn't the face value, it was the weight. So that's why he weighed him the money, because the money itself had its own intrinsic value, which is why, like Robin Hood, the stories of Robin Hood, he could be so successful because they were stealing the actual money. They were stealing the thing that had the intrinsic value. People hoarded that because it had intrinsic value. Today, we don't hoard cash because it has no intrinsic value. You can swipe a credit card and let the ones and zeros through the computer and internet do the transaction for you, and it's the same thing as if you had the cash. We don't need the cash. We've unhooked our economy from needing the cash. But back then, the actual coinage was the real value. So that's kind of a quick economics history lesson for you right there. But that's why it says what it says in verse 9. Now, 17 shekels of silver, how much does that weigh? I looked that one up. It's 7 ounces of silver. That's not a lot for a whole field. Now, silver, as of the time of the recording of this tape, so we're looking around March of 2023, the value of 1 ounce of silver is around $23 in today's money, which is sad. It honestly should be like $400 an ounce of silver right now. But there's that, again, that's a whole nother subject. We don't want to get too far off the beaten path here about economics. But in today's money, 17 shekels of silver, 7 ounces, so 7 times 23, it's about what you'd pay to buy that land today, which isn't much. That isn't a whole lot. Anybody today would love, oh yeah, if I could just buy that for 7 ounces of silver, that's spectacular. That's cheap. That's like $800 for a whole field of land. There's probably a couple of acres at least. That'd be awesome. But again, our economics is way different from their economics. It's a whole different ballgame. Okay, anyways, let's move on. Verse 10, and subscribed the evidence and sealed it, and took witnesses and weighed him the money in the balances. So this is going to the legal proceedings of buying land. In today's world, you buy land, you go to the title company gives you insurance, they do the research to find out, to make sure that the person that was selling it is actually really the seller. There's no encumbrances or liens or legal issues with the land. then you get title to the land, and that title, that piece of paper, is what allows you to say, I own the land, and then that's what you exchange with your money. So what we did back then, this is basically putting the deed to the land in writing to prove it was Jeremiah. So they had somebody wrote up like a scroll, they'd write it up. Jeremiah's buying this land from Hanamiel, and we're doing all this stuff for this much work. Witnesses would attest to the document, so there would be other people there. Their job is just to sign, yep, I witnessed that this is the amount of money and this is the land, and it's all legit and cool. It's all kosher. Then they would fold up this letter, not roll it up like a scroll, but they would like fold it up, put a wax seal on it to seal it, basically. And then there oftentimes was a second copy. So you had one that was sealed, and you have a second copy that then you could show to other people and use, basically. So that one could be examined while the sealed one was put somewhere where it couldn't be messed with, basically. So now it's all kosher, it's all legit. Verse 11, so I took the evidence of the purchase, both that which was sealed according to the law and custom, and that which was open. So this is both, he's taking both documents, the sealed one and the open one that we've just talked about. So Jeremiah is keeping both of those. Verse 12, and I gave the evidence of the purchase unto Baruch, the son of Neriah. So this is the Baruch. If you've gotten into the apocryphal writings, we have the writings of Baruch. This is the scribe that was an assistant to Jeremiah. So he's giving the deeds, the deed and the copy of the deed, basically, to Baruch, basically. He says, so I gave the evidence of the purchase unto Baruch, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, in the sight of Hanamiel, mine uncle's son, and in the presence of the witnesses that subscribed the book of the purchase, before all the Jews that sat in the court of the prison. So everybody that's in this area is technically a witness. They're all there. They've seen this transaction did happen. It's legit. It's true. It's okay. So verse 13, and I charged Baruch before them, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these evidences, this evidence of the purchase, both which is sealed, and this evidence which is open. Put them in an earthen vessel that they may continue many days. So this whole, if you're a scholar of the Bible or like to study this kind of stuff, putting them in an earthen vessel to be preserved should bring up a thought of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's basically what they did at the same time. But of course, this is like 500 years before I guess about 400 years before the Dead Sea Scrolls, really. So he got the land, he preserved the title to claim it after the captivity. This is what's interesting. Baruch is going to take the documents, put them in a sealed container, go out to the field, bury it, and then they'll be there when the exile is over and Jeremiah is out of jail. He can go dig it up and go, I own this land, this is my land, and it's going to be there. So this is a great sign of the future of Israel. This isn't, you guys are lost, you're going to be destroyed, wiped out, no more existence for Israel. If Christ, or basically God, if God is telling Jeremiah, buy land, you'll be able to use it before you die, you'll be able to enjoy the land, that is a sign of hope. And that's what this, in a way, is a metaphor for the people to realize, hey, look, Jeremiah, who we thought was the traitor, is actually buying land. He's optimist about the future of Israel. So that's, I think, the message that's supposed to be sent here. Verse 15, for thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall be possessed again in this land. They will be back. Verse 16, now when I had delivered the evidence of the purchase unto Baruch, the son of Neriah, I prayed unto the Lord, saying, Ah, Lord, so this is Jeremiah's prayer, Ah, Lord, behold, thou hast made the heaven and the earth by thy great power and stretched out arm, and there is nothing too hard for thee. So this is recognizing God as the creator, and similar to how God establishes himself. There's been several times in Jeremiah that God has established himself as the great creator, and so Jeremiah is approaching him as the great creator. Verse 18, thou showest loving kindness unto thousands, and recompensest the iniquity of the fathers into the bosom of their children after them. The great, the mighty God, the Lord of hosts is his name. Great in counsel and mighty in work, for thine eyes are open upon all the ways of the sons of men, to give everyone according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Now, verse 19 is awesome because he's stating in there, God gives us agency to make choices, and God allows us to have the consequence of those choices, whether that's a good consequence or a bad one. God does not mess with our agency. He tries to preserve our agency. He lets us choose. And then if things go bad, that's usually because of our choices. It's a consequence of our choices. Israel is being sieged because of the consequences of their choices not to repent and follow God. So that's what he's talking about, agency, and how God wants us to have agency. Agency is important. Anybody that wants to take your agency away, you got to think about that and go, okay, God wants me to have my agency. God wants me to have the opportunity to make a good choice or a bad choice and live with whatever consequence comes with those choices. So taking away people's agency is not something we should be looking at doing. Verse 20. So this is continuing the prayer, which has set signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, even unto this day, and in Israel, and among other men, and has made thee a name as at this day, and hast brought forth thy people Israel out of the land of Egypt with signs and with wonders and with a strong hand and with a stretched out arm and with great terror. So when we look at verse 21, we can see here and say this is Jeremiah talking to God, but reminding the people too that are hearing this prayer, God brought you out of Egypt. He brought your ancestors out of Egypt with great power. That's great terror should be great power, basically. Another way to think about that. So he has brought them out of Egypt with his mighty power against Pharaoh. He stopped Pharaoh, brought them over, and has taken care of them. Verse 22, and hast given them this land which thou didst swear to their fathers to give them, and a land flowing with milk and honey, so an abundant land. Verse 23, and they came in and possessed it, but they obeyed not thy voice, neither walked in thy law. They have done nothing of all that thou commandest them to do. That's the agency, that they chose not to follow God. Therefore, thou hast caused all this evil to come upon them. Behold, the mounts, they are come unto the city to take it. I'm going to pause for a second here. Actually, let me finish it. That'd be better. The mounts, they are come into the city to take it, and the city is given into the hand of the Chaldeans that fight against it, because of the sword and of the famine and of the pestilence, and what thou hast spoken is come to pass, and behold, thou seest it. So while the Babylonian army had pulled back a little to fight Egypt, they would be back within weeks to finish what they'd started, basically. And so that's where more famine, pestilence, sword, it's going to come in. It's going to get worse. Verse 25, and thou hast said unto me, O Lord God, buy thee the field for money, and take witnesses, for the city is given into the hand of the Chaldeans. Then came the word of the Lord unto Jeremiah, saying, so this is after Jeremiah just did that prayer. Now God is responding back. Verse 27, behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? Remember, Jeremiah said in his prayer, back in verse 17, there isn't anything hard for you to do. So it's kind of God is kind of going off of what Jeremiah had said and being a little rhetorical about it. Verse 28, therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, I will give this city into the hand of the Chaldeans and into the hand of Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take it. And the Chaldeans shall fight against this city, shall come and set fire on this city, and burn it with the houses, upon whose roofs they have offered incense unto Baal, and poured out drink offerings unto other gods, to provoke me to anger. So he's not just coming to take the city, he's coming to burn the city to the ground. The city is going to be destroyed. It's going to be bad. And it's because they have committed spiritual adultery or idolatry, basically of worshiping other gods. So verse 30, for the children of Israel and the children of Judah have only done evil before me from their youth. For the children of Israel have only provoked me to anger with the work of their hands, saith the Lord. So in verse 30, he makes that distinction. Children of Israel, that's the northern kingdom. The children of Judah, which is the southern kingdom, have been doing this for a long time. So if you think about it, saying that they've done evil from their youth, that means basically they were taught by their parents and the religious leaders and government leaders to do evil. Over time, evil became what was normal. And that's what they did. They've grown up doing nothing but evil because they don't know the difference, basically. So this is a systemic failure of the people and the religion and the government to change people to follow God, basically. It's so ingrained. And that's the problem, basically. Now, verse 31, for this city hath been to me as a provocation of mine anger and my fury from the day that they built it, even unto this day, and that I should remove it from before my face. So Jerusalem and Israel have been a problem the whole time they've been in the promised land. And if you go back into like Samuel and Judges and read those chapters, go through, we have all the videos of those chapters, you'll see that they were good. They didn't do so well. They had to do the 40 years of wandering. They got better, but then they didn't do so well after they got established in the land, and they got too complacent, too prosperous, and it all started to fall apart from there, basically. It's gone downhill ever since. Verse 32, because of all the evil of the children of Israel and of the children of Judah, which they have done to provoke me to anger, they, which is the people, their kings, their princes, which is the government, their priests and their prophets, which is the religious people, religious leaders, and the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and they have turned unto me the back and not the face. So they've turned away from God. Though I taught them, rising up early and teaching them, yet they have not hearkened to receive instruction. So this isn't God rising up early to teach him. This is God sending his prophets. This is a phrase that we see a lot in Jeremiah, of the prophets rising up early to go teach the people. And no one's listening to him, basically. Verse 34, but they set their abominations in the house, which is called by my name, to defile it. So they're putting their idols in the temple so they can worship their idols there instead of worshiping the God of Israel, basically. Verse 35, and they built the high places of Bel, which are in the valley of the son of Hinnom, to cause their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire unto Moloch. We've talked a lot about that in the past. Which I commanded them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, concerning this city, whereof ye say, it shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon by the sword, and by the famine, and by the pestilence. Behold, I will gather them out of all countries, whither I have driven them in mine anger and in my fury, and in great wrath, and I will bring them again unto this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely. So this is talking about the last days. So yes, it is true, they're going to be destroyed and scattered, but eventually they'll come back. I will see to it, is what God is saying. Verse 38, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. This is a great verse. It's a short one, but it's a great one because it is re-establishing connection and relationship. So this is like saying, we're going to part ways, Judah, because you want to part ways. You've already parted ways with me. Fine. If you want to go off on your own, I'm going to let you go off on your own and suffer the consequence of that. That's what's happening. But eventually, this is the prodigal son analogy. Eventually, Judah's going to go, I don't like this anymore. We need to return to the God of Israel. When they come back, God will say, I will take you back and we will come together again. This is bringing them into the covenant, bringing them back to a covenant people once again. So this is all happening technically it's already started happening in our day and age, but it hasn't hit the peak. It hasn't hit major acceleration of bringing Judah and Israel back. But it will be happening in our near future. It's going to happen a lot more. Verse 39, and I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever for the good of them and of their children after them. Now, this is really interesting to think about, okay? When we think of the idea of one heart, we can't take that literal. Sometimes this kind of goes back to the same idea that Christ talks about in the New Testament, where people say, "Oh, I am I and the Father are one. We are one." Oh, does that mean that God? They take that they take that literal, but yet Christ also says that He wants the apostles to be one with Him and one with God. But that, again, that's not coming into one big blob of intelligence. This is one in purpose. We're going after the same goals. We understand each other. We're on the same wavelength. We're working together to move forward. So this same idea is in here as one heart and one mind. We're thinking the same. We're using similar perceptions. Our maps of reality are very similar. We're helping each other. We're coordinating with each other. We're coming together. This is what it's talking about. So that's when he says that one way that they may fear me forever. So this is, again, he's saying unified. They're going to come together to be unified. We're going to have the same purposes, same connections. So when they fear me forever, this is, again, having respect for God. So they're going to come together and have great respect for God, and it's going to be for their benefit, for the good of them and of their children. So this is teaching their children properly the relationship with God. So they'll gain that relationship, and then that relationship will be taught to their children. Like what we've just seen a few minutes earlier, that the wickedness was taught by their parents to them. So righteousness in the last days will be taught to their children as well. Now, one thing that's interesting about this chapter, especially for LDS, is if you look up Doctrine and Covenants, section 45, this section, where I'm not going to read it, okay, I'll kind of talk about some of the chapter highlights, but this section is very similar to Jeremiah's chapter we're just reading right now, basically. So in section 45 of the Doctrine and Covenants, it says, Christ is our advocate with the Father. The gospel is a messenger to prepare the way of the Lord. Enoch and his brethren were received by the Lord unto himself. Christ reveals signs of his coming on the Mount of Olives. The gospel will be restored. The times of Gentiles will be fulfilled. A desolation will cover the land. Signs and wonders, resurrection to attend the second coming. Christ will stand on the Mount of Olives. The Jews will see the wounds in his hands and feet. The Lord will reign during the millennium. That's what Jeremiah is talking about, is what section 45 of the Doctrine and Covenants is. So read those two together, and you'll start to see a lot of good comparisons and connections with them. But that's what this is. In fact, verse 40, as we continue forward, it says, and I will make an everlasting covenant with them. So think of marriage covenant, relationship. That I will not turn away from them to do them good, but I will put my fear in their hearts that they shall not depart from me. Remember, fear, another way to think of fear in here is respect. They will respect God and want to be with him. Verse 41, yea, I will rejoice over them to do them good, and I will plant them in this land assuredly with my whole heart and with my whole soul. For thus saith the Lord, like as I have brought all this great evil upon this people, so will I bring upon them all the good that I have promised them. So that's what's going to be happening. They're going to bring the good back. So this is, the justice is hitting them now, but the mercy will be in the future. You've suffered enough. It's time to bring you back and restore your full benefits. Verse 43, and the field shall be bought in this land, whereof ye say, it is desolate without man or beast, it is given unto the hand of the Chaldeans. Men shall buy fields for money, and subscribe evidences, and seal them, and take witnesses in the land of Benjamin, and in the places about Jerusalem, and in the cities of Judah, and in the cities of the mountains, and in the cities of the valley, and in the cities of the south. For I will cause their captivity to return, saith the Lord. So this is a prophecy here at the end of Jeremiah about returning from the exile, bringing them back after the exile, but also in the last days, in our time frame, they will come back again spiritually, come to Christ and physically will be a part of his kingdom in the near future. So that's our future we get to look forward to as well. That's what we see there. So thanks for watching. Let's jump over to our next chapter to continue the story of Jeremiah.